Morning. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about this titanium flux 125 by Harbor Freight. I've owned a few of these in the past. I ended up selling them because I thought my workshop was going to get sold off, and I got rid of everything, and well, it didn't happen, and now I'm kind of stuck here for a while, so I ended up buying another one. And I'm going to be doing an unboxing video on this guy, as well as basically fully featured how to weld with it. And you'd actually be pretty surprised. This thing can really do pretty good welds on steel, even though it's, a cheap flux core welder. So let's go get this up on the table and open it up. Don't mind the overspray on the floor here. Got a little project going on as a gift to a buddy of mine's mother, so kind of sprayed the floor more than I did the part, but whatever. So let's get this thing up on the table. Oh, it's real heavy. Just kidding. Let me bring this down here so you can actually see what we're talking about. So this is the 125. This is flux core only. You cannot hook argon or argon CO2 tank to it for MIG. Flux core wire only, 125 amps, runs on 120 volts. Part number TIFLX 125. More importantly, this is the model number, 57861. Harbor Freight has a ton of different factories that make these, and the outside looks the same, but I'm telling you, I've opened some of these up, every one of them with a different model number. The insides are completely different, almost like a completely different welder. It doesn't even look the same. So I can guarantee you that when we weld with this and the results you see will come out of this part number. If you have a different one, it may weld a little bit different. So anyways, let's get to unboxing this thing, see what you get for your 175 bucks or 170 bucks. I'm not one for shooting like unboxing videos, but since this thing's new, why not? It'll be curious to see what this comes with, since I've owned a couple of these, like I said, so I don't know if the packaging has changed at all. All right, so you got your instruction manual. That's pretty much fire starting material. Although, sometimes you never know. This little guide is new. Shows you how to put the spool and the wire spool in there and everything. All right. Got your contact tip, comes with one, probably one on a gun, and then replaceable tips. You can weld, I believe, without these, but that's just to protect the area around the tip. All right, don't need that. Smells like chemicals. All right. Get this box out of the way. Yeah, it definitely has a distinct flavor to it. All right. That's strange. It doesn't come with a strap for the top. I remember they used to come with a strap that you could hook up, but whatever, I never used it anyways. And who knows, maybe it's hiding in a box somewhere. Now, you can see you get a pretty cheap ground clamp. I mean, this thing is about as cheap as you can get, but it will work for what you do with this. Gun itself, the same gun, yeah, and it does have a contact tip in it, as well as the shield. This is actually pretty handy when you're underneath a car welding an exhaust. I can get this open. There we go. Standard 110. Now, I've used this a lot on a 20 amp breaker, and I never tripped a 20 amp. If you use this on a 15 amp and max it out, you're probably going to end up tripping it. Ah, there's a strap. Figured it would have one. Now, one thing I don't notice is this thing used to come with a small spool of wire and it no longer appears to. And I'm just looking here. Yeah, so they got rid of the small spool. It had like not a normal spool, but like a quarter of a normal one. I don't even know what a normal spool is, so it's a good thing I bought some. Yeah, due to cost cutting, they eliminated that, which is fine. So yeah, comes a strap. The mechanism here for feeding, and I'll zoom in for you here so you can see better. Pretty simple. Since this runs on 035 and 030 flux core, the roller does have two positions on it. So if you're running 030, you want it on the 030 side. If you're running 035, you want it on that, and I'll show you here. So it looks like whatever one is on the top is what you're running. So I'm running 030, so I'll leave that on the top part. These used to have a cold feeder button, okay, down here. Sort of, there's a little switch here. Right here, you flip it up and you can feed the wire out fast to get it to the end of the tip, which is nice. Overall, I mean, it's as simple as you can get. You do have a chart here based on metal thickness and what wire you're running. I found that to be a little bit on the cold side, but overall it wasn't too bad. So there you have it. I'm going to go grab a spool of wire and we're going to put it in, get this thing plugged in and start working with it. So this setup is a little different from the one that I had. It had a spring like this, but this plate was different. Not a big deal. They all function the same. We need to find the end on this, which they melted into the plastic. Hopefully I can actually pull that out. Yeah, right. Wow, that's really stuck in there. All right. Now when you look at this, I'll zoom in for you guys. You want this to sit to where it feeds in like this. Pulls the wire off, feeds it directly into this mechanism. If you do it the opposite, it's not going to feed very well for you. I'll open this up. And there's a little area where the liner sticks out, little hole. You got to push it into there. There we go. Now actually, just to make sure I'm not an idiot, you know, I'm going to pull that back out and make sure that I put the right, whoa. 030, yeah, we're good. When you get older, you just can't trust yourself. All right, let's get that in there. It's all right if you're laughing at me. Now with that clamped down, we can put this whole spring assembly back on. Tension-wise, you want some tension on here. I don't know that their directions give a... Okay. Yeah, it doesn't really say, so. A little bit of tension is more than enough on that. All right, so to set these drive rollers, what you have to do is you're supposed to take a block of wood, which I'll grab one, put about 3 inches of stick out, and then you tighten the wire feeder until it can kink the wire. So I'll go and grab a piece of wood. All right, so I got the wire fed through the gun. I just did the cold feed button, and I took this contact tip out, and as soon as the wire hit out here, I slipped the contact tip on and screwed it down, and we're good to go. So I'll power this thing up. Well, it didn't let the smoke out, so we're good there. It's actually quieter than the other one that I had. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put the settings halfway up roughly. I'm gonna hold this about 3 inches, we'll say that, and let's see if it bends the wire over. Yeah, it does a little bit. Let me clip that. Try it one more time. Yeah, the feed could be a little bit more tension on that. See if it does it now. Yeah, that's better. So I didn't really have to adjust it much. And again, what I'm actually adjusting is the drive tension rollers here. Presumably the different wire diameters will have slightly different tension, but that's all you want. You basically want it to bend it over at about 2 inches, which it barely does. If it's too loose when you're welding, it won't feed properly. And if it's too tight, where there's too much traction, I guess you could make it hard on the little motor in there and burn it out. But tension seems good, so let's shut this down, and I'll start doing a setup for a weld. I got a little bit ahead of myself there. Before we go and weld, I just want to cover a couple things about this. So if you don't happen to have just this particular welder, but you have a flux core welder or a MIG welder and you want to run flux core weld wire, what you have to do is you have to run the gun, so your contact tip, your output, on DCEN. So this needs to be hooked to the negative side. This welder is only for flux core, so that's how it should be set up from the factory. If you have like a Lincoln Easy MIG 140, and you've been doing MIG wire with gas, you have to reverse the polarity. So inside the machine, there's typically bus bars that you have to swap, or a wire that you have to swap from one lug to another. Or in some cases, you change the output by changing where the output plugs in, like ESAB is big on that. Some of the other welders out there do. Or maybe even just changing the ground clamp. What I'm trying to get at is you have to run flux core wire on DC EN output, which is not the same as MIG, which is DCEP. Another thing I wanted to cover is Harbor Freight and flux core wire has a really bad reputation in general. And that's not so much because of this welder, but those cheap black box Harbor Freight welders that are like 125 amps and less, the Chicago Electric, those actually weld on AC output. The problem with that is all of the wire out there for flux core wire is all DCEN. None of them are designed for AC output. So literally, no matter what you do with those welders, and they don't have like adjustment like this, they just have like high, low, and then a wire feed speed. But no matter what you do with those, you're gonna have excess spatter, overall poor looking welds, and that's simply because they output AC and not DC. So whatever you can do to not buy one of those, they're a waste of money. You can't produce decent welds with it. Save up your pennies, get this, trust me on that. The last thing I'll mention before we start is inside of here, you don't want to keep the wire in here all the time. And if you do, you want to put desiccant packets in here. Flux core wire, like what's in this guy, it's very prone to picking up moisture in the air, and either the wire surface will rust or it's going to absorb moisture, and what you're going to run into is issues with what's called wormhole porosity, or just porosity in general, and overall poor welds. The longer, like say I left this sitting in the shop or even in a garage for a year and then tried to weld it, your welds are going to be trash because of that. So generally speaking, down here in the shop, the moisture level isn't that high. I still put desiccant packets in here when I shut it, that way to help keep that moisture out of the wire. If you live, or if this thing's gonna sit in a higher moisture environment where you're at, pull a wire spool off when you're done, put it in a plastic bag with desiccant, trust me on that. And if the wire's like a couple months old and it's been sitting on there, only use it for practice. Don't actually weld anything that needs strength because you will have issues with that. Oh, one last thing, because I love talking too much. I was thinking about the drive tension and why that's important, and I didn't mention before, if this is cranked down too tight for the drive roller tension, you could crush that wire. And since the inside is flux cord and it's a hollow tube, if you were to crush that, it could present problems in your weld with issues, again, with porosity and undesirable side effects in your weld. So you want the tension correct. Don't have it too loose or too tight. Use the instructions or follow what I said to get it within range. Beyond that, we're going to be test welding on 1/8 inch to start, which according to this with 030 wire is feed 6. So I will move that over. And it says E1/2 to F1/2. So we're actually, I'll go up to closer to F. So the lower number is how fast the wire comes out, and the top number is the voltage that you're running. Now these don't correlate to any real numbers, it's just use this guide. If your flux core wire welder or your MIG welder you're running flux core on has like voltages and numbers, use your machine's recommended settings or the wire that you're running, the recommended settings for that.